Welcome to On the Way Classroom with Tony Crisp. Each weekday, Monday through Friday, Dr. Crisp will teach the Bible from its historical, geographical, linguistic, and cultural context. Tune in daily to start your day right and to deepen your understanding of how to better walk the way and enjoy the journey. Now, here's your host, Dr. Tony Crisp.
Welcome to On the Way Classroom. Today, we're going to pull it all together during the Intertestamental Period and the preparation for the Son of God. So over the next two sessions, you are not going to want to miss these, because these sessions will bring together what we've been talking about now for several days. Remember, the Old Testament canon has closed. Malachi has thundered his last prophecy. And up until this point of time, the New Testament canon has not even the first book been written. And so the events are taking place that will be written down as the Gospels of the Son of God. But we're looking at, in the fullness of time, God sending forth His Son. That is, when the opportunity was right, when the occasion was right, when God had gotten the world ready, He sent Jesus into the world. And so we've talked about the synagogue system that was all over the Greco-Roman world. The language of the day is now Koine Greek, Common Greek, and the philosophy, the education was still Greek. But now there was a new power rising up in the West, and that new power was Rome. And Rome would become the dominating empire for hundreds of years. It was prophesied by the prophet Daniel in the prophecies of the world kingdom in Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7. But let's look at this Roman period and the events that led up to the birth of Christ. And so I want you to follow me, because I'm going to deal with history that some of you might not be familiar with. And for those of you who are Roman history and Greek experts, please know that I'm dealing with general themes. Sometimes I'll get specific, but mostly I am just helping to set the stage, because we don't have time for a series of classroom discussions. Remember, these are 15-minute vignettes that I'm giving you. And so we're just cramming a lot of history into just a session. And so in 63 BC, Pompey, the Roman general, which was part of the first triumvirate, three men who basically led the Roman Republic, Pompey the general conquered what would have been the Greek and the Persian Empire of time past. And so from 63 BC all the way through the Roman period, which lasted several hundred years, you had Roman culture and Roman dominance in the world. Now, that was important for the preparation for the Son of God. Why? Because after the death of Julius Caesar, you remember, at the hands of Brutus and Cassius, there was a great shakeup. Now, this begins to get us ready for the New Testament period. And the reason is Julius Caesar had a grandnephew by the name of Octavian. All of these Romans had several names, but he was known as Octavian. And he and Mark Antony, that you read about in the history books, and that's known quite well in Roman history, and another man by the name of Lepidus, which we're not going to deal with, they were the second triumvirate. In other words, they ruled Rome with the Senate. It was a republic at this time and not called the Roman Empire. And Octavian pretty much ruled the West, and Mark Antony ruled what we would call the East, and that included the Ptolemaic dynasty, what was the Ptolemaic dynasty of the Greeks in North Africa, what would have been the Seleucid Empire or kingdom during the days of the Greek period. And that would have been in the area of Syria, and remember, Mesopotamia. And you had the Levant, or the nation of Israel, in between. So there were a lot of battles between the Seleucid kingdom and rulers and the Ptolemaic rulers. But in the Ptolemaic dynasty, the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty was not a king, it was a queen by the name of Cleopatra. And you remember the escapades of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra and the birth of their son, where we get the concept of the Caesarean. And so all of this took place during this Roman period. And so after the death of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and Octavian dividing up the East and the West, Mark Antony fell in love with Cleopatra and formed somewhat of a league together. And much of what Cleopatra was wanting to do was to maintain this Greek kingdom. And so Mark Antony, in order to appease her and continue to have a confederacy together and strengthen his hand against Octavian, he was giving away much of the kingdom, including great swaths of Egypt, to Cleopatra. And this enraged Octavian. And so, to make a long story short, in 31 BC, in the Battle of Actium, the forces of Cleopatra and Mark Antony came against the forces of Octavian. And you can read about this in the history books and in that Ionian Sea. And the result of that battle was the forces of Mark Antony and of Cleopatra resulted in a total defeat by Octavian of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. They both fled back to Egypt, and Octavian strengthened his hand, and he became the dominant ruler and the Caesar of the Roman Republic. Through a long series of events, Octavian, in gaining more and more power, his name was changed to the August One, the Exalted One. And so he became known not as Octavian, which was his given name, but Augustus. And Augustus Caesar began to expand the Roman Republic to where under him it became the Roman Empire, because he ruled all of the Greco-Roman world of that time, all of what was once ancient Persia, all of what was once ancient Greece, and he ruled over what would have been Israel during that time, and Israel today and Israel in ancient times. That land bridge between the Asian continent and the African continent, and that is the boundaries of Israel. And so it was during this time that Octavian, now Augustus Caesar, expanded the Roman army to where the legions were all over the world. Well, in order for them to occupy all of these places and rule as they did, they had to have roads to travel back and forth, for supplies to be taken from Rome to there, wherever there was, and from to get word back so that these legions could travel to wherever they needed to put down any revolt or rebellion anywhere under the rule of Rome. And so great Roman roads were built that connected the East and the West, the continent of Europe and the continent of Asia and the continent of Africa. And these roads were famous roads that you can still see today: the Appian Way, the Ignatian Way. If you go with me to Greece, or you're able to go to Greece or to Rome or to Turkey, or to Israel or to Egypt, you will see Roman roads that were built 2,000 years ago that are still in existence, that connected all of the ancient world. Now, that's very important. Why? Because we're talking about in the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son. So God got the synagogue system ready to where there would be a preaching point in every community, in every city, in the world of the New Testament. But just because there were preaching points in every part of the world that was not enough. There had to be a common language because Jerusalem was the center of the Jewish world, and that is where the temple was during the days of Jesus, where the first temple had stood centuries earlier. And from there, the gospel would go out, and the Son of God would come to the earth. And so now there had to be not just synagogue system, and here is Jerusalem, but there had to be a common language that would be spoken so that the people who were coming out from Jerusalem, which was the center of everything that had to do with Messiah, could be spread out. But the people who would go to these synagogues and preach the gospel of Jesus, they would have to have good roads to go on, connectors. And so God not only prepared the synagogue system through the period of the Babylonian captivity and exile and the Persian Empire, but also raised up Ezra, who would give the Torah portion readings where they would all be studying and reading the same portion of Scripture and looking forward to Messiah coming. But now there's a language that the New Testament would be written in. There are roads that they can travel on, but it's not finished yet. The world had to get ready for the Messiah to be born in Bethlehem. Remember, that's where in the tribe of Judah, the city of David, to whom God had made promises concerning a kingdom and a lineage and a dynasty through which the Messiah would come. And so it was in the fullness of time that God was getting the world ready. So Augustus expanded the roads, he expanded the military, he had so much overhead that he went to the Senate of Rome and he said, we're going to have to take a census of where we have people spread out all over the earth, because remember that no government has money except that which it extracts from its citizens through fees and taxes. And so he took a census so that he could tax the people, and he was given authority to do that by the Senate of Rome. And so it was during the days of Augustus Caesar that there went out a decree that all the world should be taxed. Now, this taxing was first made when Quirinius was governing Syria, and all went to be taxed, everyone to his ancestral city. And so Mary and Joseph, being of the house and lineage of David, went up from Nazareth, where they lived, out of the Galilee into Judea unto the city of David, and they were going to be registered there so they could be taxed. And Mary was great with child. She had come to completion of her pregnancy, and she brought forth her firstborn son and laid him in a manger. And when we come back together again, you're going to hear the rest of the story.
Thanks for listening to On the Way Classroom with Dr. Tony Crisp. Tune in each weekday for more information on how to read, study, and understand the Bible. If you have questions, please write to questions@tonycrisp.org. That's questions@tonycrisp.org. Questions@tonycrisp.org. Thanks for listening and have a blessed day on the way.